everybody. Welcome to Pealed Back's LiveCast Conversations with, as always, I'm your host, Gene the Enjoyment Coach. And today on episode 68, we have my friend, Dr. Lisa Hartman. Lisa has spent her career in education and is driven by supporting others in their leadership and their growth journeys. Lisa's earned her master's in education and doctorate in leadership from Creighton University. Lisa recognized that her passion and purpose was in education because the day she stepped foot into a classroom, she knew she would forever have a passion for education. Lisa's taught a variety of subjects to a variety of grade levels, including teaching English to adults. Lisa's transitioned into school leadership, and during her time as a school administrator, she's overseen grade levels from PK to 12. Lisa currently serves as the Director of Educational Services for an area education agency in Iowa. And her career journey is now taking her more into coaching and finding new ways to support others. Lisa, my words cannot do you justice, so let's get right into it.
Yeah, Gene, thank you. That was I love the countdown too. I'm feeling energized, ready to be here, and just appreciate you having me on the show.
Perfect. We start high, and I personally always love to do a little dance and stuff behind closed doors, and sometimes maybe we just need more dance breaks injected into this.
Yes.
Well, let's talk a little bit about your journey, education, master's, doctorate, and now on your coaching journey. You've got a lot, so share a little bit about what was the kernel that got this all started.
Oh goodness. If I had to narrow it down to one kernel, actually I can pinpoint a moment. You have those moments in your life where you look back and it's still incredibly clear. You can remember with great detail that moment. I had graduated from the first degree I got from Iowa State, and I don't know what I was doing. I was working in insurance because that's what my dad did, And so I'm sitting there trying to sell health insurance, and early 20s. And I just remember being in my early 20s and figuring out how health insurance worked and recognizing that people were coming into the office who were in their 40s, 50s, and had no idea how it worked. So people would come in and I just sit down. And I remember just I have this picture of me just drawing stuff out for people. And I ended up taking that office from selling 7 health insurance policies one year to we were top 50 in the country the next. But it was because people kept coming back and buying health insurance policies from us because they were I don't even care if you guys are more expensive, but you took the time to educate me and teach me how it worked. And for me, it wasn't about getting the sale. It was I wanted people to leave knowing and understanding how this worked. And so at the same time, I was reading Purpose Driven Life. And, that book talks a lot about kind of finding your North Star and thinking back through your life and when were the times that you really felt like there was something coming up for you. And for me, it was always helping kids, working with kids. And so that's just kind of what spurred for me, man, I need to go back. I need to do something with this whole, I like to teach people stuff. So that's kind of that's the kernel. That was the thing that kind of really started the career trajectory.
Yeah, I guess maybe I'm going to have to change that questioning up. It's moments, right? And it sounds like that wasn't a little shift in time. It was that moment had some range to it, but it all tied it back together to that aha moment of going, oh, if I actually just educate people on what they're going to get instead of treating them as a transaction, we get a whole lot more clients, which is crazy, right? That's so unheard of. It's not. All the business people listen to that, take some notes right now.
I know, right? People say all the time it's about building relationships, but sometimes I'm gosh, but that's so cliche. Almost people say it all the time. What does that really mean? And I think back at the time, I wasn't consciously thinking about it like that. But me taking the time to quote, build that relationship, but educate the people sitting in front of me, was I guess a sales tactic, but I wasn't looking at it as a sales tactic. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, it goes into your tagline is empower and inspire, right? So
yeah.
Where I see from that is you were living from those core values at a young age into your professional career, and just seeing what happens when you actually empower somebody to be able to make a choice, right?
Yeah, I love that you pointed that out because it's so true because, we all have our core values that are so almost ingrained that it takes a while to figure out like what actually are they. But like to go back to that too, it's almost just like that. Yeah, like for me, it was never, but I've never been driven by money. It's always been driven by wanting to contribute, wanting to know that like when my time here is done, I've left people better. And so that hasn't changed whether I've worked in an insurance agent's office or I've worked with high schoolers or I've worked with adults. Like the mission's always the same. And I love those words I kind of picked because they do come up for me as values, but it's all about those three things for me, for others.
You know what I really like about that? Words, spit them out, Gene. The thing that I liked about that is the way that you framed it is like, it doesn't matter. You've got this inspire and this empower, leading people to breakthroughs. It's like, it doesn't matter what like the end goal is. It could be like education. It could have been selling life insurance policies, helping adults, helping teens. Like it was all powered by this. Like you always kind of could come back to going, are these happening? Cool. Then it doesn't matter where it's being deployed into.
Yeah. And, we talked a little bit before the show just about like our own career journeys and where to go with things. But I think about that a lot with people, and especially with us being in this, whether, we believe it or not, of this great resignation, but people like exploring other things in their lives. But sometimes I feel like whatever your core values are, or let's just say your strengths, like I think about, doesn't always necessarily mean you have to quit your job tomorrow and start a new career. It could just be a conversation about, or a thought process about, where can I employ these strengths, or what does my mind shift need to be, or what conversations do I need to have so that I can live out these values in my current role.
Right. There's some good things to noodle around. Is like, yes, this resignation time is it's happening, but I think it's like people are coming to terms with going, okay, what is actually important to me? Like if I'm going to be lead an exciting life like this enjoyment coach tries to keep telling us every week, is like, what does that actually mean to me? How do I go farm these values? They see them, they're like, oh, I can't get that here. Maybe you can. Like, I think there's a distinction between doing the work to find out what it is that's actually important to you, and then having the courage to step into like that conversation is like giving whoever you're working with an opportunity to be like, oh, well, we still want you on this bus, and we see that your seat needs to change. Cool, let's maybe do that.
Yes.
Or maybe you're working with an asshole and it's time to quit. Like those, but those are two different things. Like, either way, are you having that courage to have the conversation?
Yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, sometimes, right, like you're just in a situation that when you recognize like this is so not in alignment with my values and who I am and where I want to go, different story, but like, it could be a conversation. It could just be showing up more intentionally. It could be, I need these things taken off my plate, but I'd love to have these things added to my plate. I mean, there could potentially be options.
Yeah. And I think that's I think if you live by that and operate by them and understand them, like it does actually open up a lot of options in front of you.
Yes. Well, and that's, the great thing about like, what people like you and I do in some of those coaching conversations with people is help them explore, like, what are your values? Like I just saw a thing on the John Maxwell podcast that was like something about how like, you don't know the answers to certain questions until you're asked the question. So sometimes, it's like, gosh, I might not really know that this is a value of mine, or I've never explored a certain thing because it's just never been pulled out of me. I just don't know.
Yeah. I think that resonates quite a lot, right? Like, is like, what are they until somebody asks, and you almost need them to be asked from an external source sometimes, because you hear it in that different voice and you don't get the feedback loop that goes on in your own mind. It's just like, hey, what is that? And you're like, why does that hit differently? And then boom, like an answer comes out. You're like, why are the voices telling me something different now?
Yes. I mean, like, have you ever been part of like we're always in meetings, it seems like all the time, but once in a while you get in meetings with somebody who just asks really great questions, and it'll make people step back and be like, oh, wow, thanks for asking that question. And to me, like, that's what coaching is all about. It's just this dance with your client of like figuring out like what's the right question I can plant to really make them think and elicit something good here.
Yeah. Well, and I think as well, like the being in that position, it comes down to practicing asking good questions. I'm sure it maybe didn't originate at Tony Robbins. I've heard it starting from him is the whole like you're the and now I'm going to butcher it totally. But the sense of it is the value of your life or like the successes in your life are directly correlated to the what type and value of the questions you ask. So if you ask low value
Ooh.
questions, you're going to get low value answers, and low value answers lead you to low value actions, which low value results in your life. And if you start asking high value questions, like the hard ones, the big open ended ones, you can get new incredible results that come from that. So your results are directly based on the questions that are going around upstairs or the questions you're actually being open to discovering.
Oh, I love that. We had one time at Creighton this individual come and speak. His name was Dr. Roger Franceschi, and he talked about the poetry and the pose, and he talked and prose, poetry and prose, and it basically he was talking about like how there's the art and the skill and everything we do, and like you referencing that quote or referencing about Tony Robbins like reminds me of like, gosh, the art and skill that's intertwined in figuring our own selves out, or if you're coaching and assisting somebody else. Like it brings me back to when I first transitioned from working with kids to working with adults. And I remember like we're kind of given like a structured set of questions to ask, like after we go in and do a formal observation. And the questions are like, how did you think the lesson went? What would you do different next time? And I remember like just feeling like I was falling flat on my face for a while because I'd be like, how was the lesson? And they'd be like, good. I'd be like, okay. What would you do different? I might have a different seating arrangement. Okay. And so it took me like years to figure out like, so I mean, like there's the questions, right? There's questions on a page, but then there's like the art of figuring out like how to dive deeper with somebody, how to reach into a spot that like maybe feels uncomfortable or maybe feels like, gosh, they just want to get rid of me, but like going for it and like drilling down because really it's not about me, it's about asking the right questions for them, like for their own
Yeah.
reflection. Like it's not about me, but I think I went into those conversations a lot thinking this is about me, it's part of my job to do their evaluation, I've got to check this off the list and submit it. And it was just a complete wrong way to think about it.
Oh, I really like that. Like, and pull the me out of those situations when you're working with other people. It's like it doesn't matter if you're a teacher, a
Yeah.
engineer, a coach, or whatever it is. Like at the end of the day, like really, if you're serving and someone's
Mm.
buying whatever it is from you, be like, it's all about them. Like how
Yeah.
do you start to pull like that yourself out of going to that equation to go, I'm the smartest person in this room, I've done all this training, I've got all these letters behind my name, listen to me.
Hmm.
Time and place, but like is it actually in service of somebody else?
Yeah, that's such a great connection there. I mean, even just thinking about now in my current role and like the one-on-one. So like all of our administrative team does one-on-ones with the people they supervise. We do them like 3 times a year, and we try and talk through like, hey, what kind of questions are you going to ask? And we kind of have a list of questions. But once again, it's like, who is that for? Like, is that for you as the administrator? So at the end of the year, you can tell your boss, like, yep, I did my 3 one-on-ones with everybody. Or is that conversation like for the other people? Because it totally just switches up. It shouldn't even be about a list of questions. It should be
Yeah.
about like, we could all start with the same question, but depending on who we're sitting across the table from, that conversation could look totally different in a 1-hour conversation than the next person.
Yeah, then it comes down to like when you're walking into that situation now, no longer is like, oh, I've got my check mark, I don't get in trouble from my boss. It's just like,
Mhm.
hey, how do we think, how do we want to find out how they want to be served? Are they being served? Do we have people that are happy? Do we have people that are on the cusp of telling us they're going to quit? And is there a lot of them? Like what is that? So you can actually get into maybe building that space to have real difficult conversations. And getting to a point where you look at conversations as not difficult, but like tension or pressure, be like, tension and pressure is what makes diamonds. So it can either be a good or a bad thing.
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge with that is, we all have ego, and I don't mean like ego like we all have like super big heads, but I mean we all have our own self-interest. We all have to deal with ego and figuring out when to check that and when we hear it. And I think to go into some of those conversations and check your ego at the door, it's really hard. It's really hard to do that, and it's really hard to be in service of. And I think one of the things for me is my shadow side is trying hard not to take things personally. So, to really open up those conversations to be like, how can our organization be in service of you? Like, it could potentially be really hard to hear some of the things that are going to come your way.
And that's usually like where the biggest like achievements come from, though. So I flipped that back in my service provider days. I was blessed to be the guy that all the difficult clients got sent to. Why? Because I would fight them back, and we would have some real like interesting conversations. And I had on multiple occasions had some of those clients go, the last guy before you or last person was a fill in the blank. It's usually not a positive one. You don't let me get away with anything. And they ended up being like some of our best paying clients, right? Like, if you're willing to get into the scrappiness of it, and I think like avoid that fear of going, how's this going to make me feel? Be like, you might feel like in that moment. Be like, do you want to feel in that like little moment, or do you want to feel like, oh my God, should have had this conversation like a week ago, 2 weeks ago? Like, how long am I willing to drag this feeling out? And it's just getting like bigger and stronger and like more devious.
Gosh, that's so true. And I think that's been one of the things, even in the last couple of years, that I think I've learned in leadership is just, I used to get really frustrated when, during those conversations, and you'd meet with somebody over and over, and it just seemed like they were just bitching all the time. And it's just like, oh my God, these conversations are just draining. All this person does is just bitch about stuff. But I've come to realize that like you can get through to the other side. I think sometimes people like want to know, like, can I trust you? And once it's like, I can trust you, now the bitching turns a little bit. And it's like, now I'm going to start to open up to you a little bit more about some things that are real. Or if you're listening through just what you feel like is just bitching, you can pick up some things that are actually like useful and helpful. But again, like making that judgment call, or maybe quite frankly, it is just bitching. But I think like putting your ego aside and like, it's not about me and that I'm annoyed as fuck about this right now. It's about like, okay, I need to support this person, and also not just for the individual, but for the organization. So, how can I continue to engage in this? And it's not about me.
No. And that's an interesting point that comes up there too. Like when you hear those things, be like, oh, this is a person that requires some support. And can you then deploy that support? And then there's a pathway of choose their own adventure after that. But like, can you get past the whole like, oh my God, Cindy, again, seriously, are we doing this? All right, you say what you need to say, or you can get right into it and be like, hey, this is what I'm hearing. Like, this has been coming up quite often. Like, what is the actual problem here? What do we need to explore today?
Yes. And that right there, I think that takes some guts too, to just like to move from like, okay, I'm just listening to this, I'm not sure where to go with that, but to move to that, it's not even aggressive. It's just like being assertive of like, okay, this is what I'm hearing. Where do we need to go with this? And I think that's true leadership too, of being able to, it's almost like leaning into like how you talked about, like, I'm going to kind of I'm going to go at them a little bit. Like that's like leaning into it and inviting it. And then, we might need to go a little bit more. But I think sometimes maybe at the beginning of my leadership journey, like I wouldn't even lean into that and ask those questions because it was just like, I just want this conversation to be over.
Like this was wildly uncomfortable, and I was not prepared for it today.
Right. So that's about me, right? Like, this is uncomfortable. I just want it to end. We're done.
Yeah, it's that whole like I think that's like a part after all this, I'm gonna write that on the whiteboard here. Is it about me? No.
Mm.
Right. And no, well sometimes it can be, but that's when it's you focus. If you're not gonna be in service of others, like how can you then like strip that off and do like the self work of like being in service of you? It's like it could seem like a bit of an infinite loop, but like maybe there's opportunities to hold your own space too.
Yeah, for sure. And like, one of the books that I've read that's really kind of changed my thinking about this. I don't know if you're familiar with this, but maybe your next little challenge, add this to the list if you haven't read it yet. But Cy Wakeman, she's absolutely phenomenal, and she has a book. It's called No Ego, and it's pretty small, but it covers a lot of the things that we just talked about, and will really kind of open your eyes to, gosh, that's my ego at play when you do or think certain things.
Interesting. I haven't read that one yet, but I will add it to my list. You've already recommended another book, The Slight Edge, which I've gone through as well.
Yes, that's a good one. And I have not read Atomic Habits, but I think it's probably very similar in concept.
I think a lot of those things are right. Like it all like ties down to like finding that one thing to just kind of push yourself
Yeah.
beyond your comfort zone a little bit. Like what is just beyond? And I think that just beyond is a big part of like self growth. Is like, oh, like I know where I need to be like, but if you're like comfort zones here, you need to get it to there and then here and then here. Because if you try, I found if you try to take like big monstrous leaps, like I can do it, and you never make it, and then you land in this like up in discomfort, and you're like, oh, I'm too far from both shores. Now I'm in trouble. Like, what do we do, right? Like, I'm pro taking a leap, but not like being ridiculous about it because that's like just the land where bad things happen, right? Like, and most
Right.
people do not handle that well in some shape or form through like not taking self care, not like actually knowing how to
Mm.
get back to it, taking the lessons from that leap. There's all these things that leap around. I don't even know how I got to this rant, but I'm going to pin that now. This isn't about me. This is about you.
Oh, slight edge. That's what we were talking about. But I mean, just thinking about like being an educator too, and just thinking about like whether it's kids or adults, but like when we get to dabble in our, discomforts, that's where learning and growth really happens. I mean, if you're feeling comfortable in your knowledge, or if you're feeling comfortable as you go throughout every day, you're not learning and growing.
No, not typically. And I used to
Right.
say like like people that are in that case, like we talked about this in like reference to other companies. It's like if you're not growing even a little bit in some shape or form, be like you're actually dying. You're the walking dead. You just don't know that you're
Yeah.
dead yet.
Totally agree. Yes.
And it's like I think it's in the Slight Edge where it's just like, well, you do that little 1% day over day or week over week, like that gap eventually ends up getting pretty big for this. What he calls, I believe, he calls it the success curve, or I forget what he calls for the unsuccess curve. But like it really doesn't take a whole lot, but it takes compound interest of doing those things on a very regular basis.
Yeah, which again, that reminds me of James Clear and just like how he talks about habits. But you think what you said earlier about like, sometimes people have these lofty goals like way out here, which is great. But like, I think sometimes because people just keep it way out here, then when it doesn't happen immediately, like then it goes away. And now I've wasted all this time and energy. But it's really about you can still have this dream, this vision over here, but let's back this up and baby step this
Yeah.
back. What do you need to do today? What do you need to do tomorrow? That will, like you said, be like compound interest build up over time so you can achieve that lofty goal.
Oh, 100%, right? Like I'm pro North Stars having it. You want to have a big BHAG, fill your
Yeah,
boots
yeah,
and understand that we wildly overestimate how much we can get done in a year and wildly underestimate how much we can get done in 10 years, right? Like if you're going to set a big enough BHAG, you're not getting to it in a year. And if you do, it was just a goal. It wasn't like a big hairy audacious one. It wasn't like this big overarching vision. Be like, just understand it takes daily steps to get to it, and it's not going to take the amount you think it is.
yeah. And I love that you reference BHAG BHAG, by the way. Was that Jim Collins? But I had
Yeah, I think
referenced
that's
that like
from
a
good
month
to
ago.
great. Yeah.
And yeah, I referenced it like a month ago, and I was so happy that people knew what it was. I was like, yes, BHAGs. It's important, I think, when we're talking about like setting the vision, whether it's for your organization or your, personal life, to have that big, hairy, audacious goal. But then you can't forget about, baby stepping it back.
Yeah, you got to still be like in the here, what's happening right here, because like really that's all we've got. Like we can't do anything about the past, and we can only influence the future because that too isn't set in stone. So like, what are we going to do right here, right today? What's one thing we're going to do towards getting there? Then do it,
Yes.
and then
Yeah.
tomorrow, look back up at your North Star. Go, what did I learn yesterday? What can I apply to being in this moment? And where do I hope it will take me tomorrow? Cool, take the step and find out. It's just that to me, that's the cycle.
Yes. Well, and like this whole conversation kind of has me reflecting on like, different steps and different things I've learned along the way of my career journey. But one of the things I think that I've come to learn and know, in the last several years is exactly what you just talked about, was like the here and now. Because I think in the past, I could get really caught up in what happened yesterday, and then also get really caught up in what's going to happen tomorrow. And I'm not saying I still don't like plan for things in advance, but like, when I can spend and focus my energy on like this moment, I have a friend, Sean Bailey, who taught me that about how like, well, you and I will never get this moment back. Like we just have this moment together, and what we're creating right now is unique to like this specific time. And so often I would go into conversations or be part of a meeting, and I'm really somewhere else. And it's a totally different experience to live your life like truly present in the moment. It's hard, it's exhausting. Um, but I think it really helps kind of tamper some anxiety and just help me live my life to the fullest, to be in the moment.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Like I think that's trying to live in that moment is the most rewarding and hardest part to do, because I think maybe it's not by default, maybe it's like babies were really good at being in the moment, but as we've grown up, we've like learned to have to like address our past and then think about where you're going,
Mm.
and like think about where you are. Like even this morning, so I'm just wrapping up 75 hard, so that means like two workouts, one's outside, so I'm outside listening to what is it, Beyond Order by Jordan Peterson. It's an Audible, and I had
Mhm.
this moment where it's like something about it, like I got telling myself a daydream, and it's snowing a little bit here, and I just kind of stopped and went, oh, that's what the here is. And like I just like was
Mm.
like so like zoned into it, like all of a sudden I turned off the Audible and was just like listening to the snowfall and like being there in
Whoa.
that moment, and like all those stories just kind of evaporated. And as I grabbed out my recorder afterwards and like, note to self, this is what just happened. But like it's incredible, for even when you've done the work like we have, is like you still get caught up in like things that aren't really happening. So what's happening right here?
Yes. Well, and I would say too, like when people used to talk about like meditation or yoga, like I used to think like it was almost like a badge of honor that I'm like, my mind is so busy, I can't do that. Like I can't shut my mind off like that. Like it bothers me. But like though that is also another practice that has become like I heard somebody talk about, I read this book called Quit Like a Woman, and it's Holly Whitaker. She's talking about like the alcohol culture that we live in. And so she's talking about how basically like women should love themselves enough where it's not about quitting drinking to quit drinking, but quitting drinking because you love your body. But anyway, so she's talking about like she's talking a lot about mindfulness, and she's talking about how like that was part of her preventative care. So with her doing meditation and yoga, that was how she set up her day in her life so she could be resilient to what came at her. And I just really resonate with that concept. Like I've been dabbling with meditation for the past year or two, and it's really helped me find those moments that you just described, because if I can practice with like a guided meditation, like on YouTube or something, then there are times in my day when I'm like, okay, Lisa, zero in, focus on this. I can do it so much. It comes more easily than it did before when I thought I was too cool for meditation.
That mind where it's just like, I've got this busy badge and I've earned it. Look at me. I'm going to show it to everyone. I'm too busy for this. Like, how busy are
Yeah.
you? I've got 10 of them. Oh, you've got 11. I got to be a little bit more busier.
That
And
was
then all of
me.
a
Yeah,
sudden,
yeah.
like you kind of like, I don't know about you. Like I got into like my mid 30s and like, I'm on like burnout number 3 and going,
Yes.
do I, is this working? Like, I think something's broken here. Like what's going on? Right. Like it's, that 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 I've heard from other people as well. Be like, I can't, my mind can't stop. Be like, it can, and it probably
You
should. Like,
can.
be like, I don't have time for that. Who is? I think, oh man, I heard it in reference to Jerry Seinfeld before, but it's just like, oh, you don't have time for like 20 minutes of meditating? Great, you need 40. That's like
Yeah.
kind of like that flip to it. It's just like, oh, you actually need more of it. But out of all that, my favorite word that you said was that preventative part.
Hmm.
Is that
Yes.
preventative
Well, like
maintenance?
we've all been through stressors, even pre-COVID, but I think since COVID's come around, like there are people's lives have been impacted, and we've had to be more resilient than we've been asked to be before. And then being in the education space, and I don't know what it's like in your part of the world right now, but it's gotten pretty political here too. And then just with COVID and what's happening, like it's really, teachers are really struggling right now. And so,
Yeah,
the way to combat stress, I believe, is to really beef up your resiliency practices. And there's a lot of them we can employ, and one of them happens to be meditation.
yeah. Oh, 100% is, and everyone can do it. And the thing I've learned about it is like I used to go into it thinking, am I doing it right? I don't know. And like removing that, that's a part of learning about that awareness and stuff, like being in that moment is like, there's no right or wrong. There's just like, it's a practice for a reason. It's just, you go practice, and there's monks that have been doing it all their lives and they still practice and they're still learning and they're still growing through it.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like exercise, right? I mean, like, if any of us pick up a new exercise practice, there's always going to be that self-doubt there a little bit too, of like, am I doing this right? And you keep doing it till you're like, yeah, this feels good. I got this. And then it just kind of becomes habit, and you look forward to doing it.
Yeah. And and then there's like this habit, and like, I don't know, the idea of how do you turn more of those good things for you into practice, where it's just like, I'm just going to practice this. This is getting me prepared for the big game, if that metaphor lands. But like, how do you just make practice and make it okay that like practice is this place to be messy, no one's right and no one's wrong. It's just
Ooh.
like, you're just getting into it to practice. Like, what, for me, that's my going to be my takeaway. Like, where else can I just add practice to my life?
I really like that. And like practicing too, like, hey, what works for me? And sometimes you might need to try on some different things for a little bit. Like we talk a lot sometimes about decision fatigue, about how, and especially with COVID, a lot of us have to make new decisions a lot
Yeah.
because of what's happening with COVID. And so you get so overwhelmed with decisions. By the end of the day, you're like, I don't know what the hell is for dinner. Like I made way too many decisions today. And about how you can combat that with like, what decisions can you make that are automatic? Like, can you set your
Yeah.
timer on your coffee maker? Can you put your outfit out the night before? Can you do some of those things? And so like, whether it's exercise or filling up your water the night before, or meditation or yoga, or whatever it is that you journaling, like what
Yeah.
can you try on and practice, and then like take note throughout the day, like, was I able to better handle some of the stressors that came my way, and could it be because of some of these things I'm practicing and trying on right now?
Yeah. Oh, I love that. There's like a lot of that resonates with me. Curious to hear from you. Like, what in your life have you like automated or put into that practice?
So okay, I can tell you when, so I have a 3, a 4-year-old, a 3-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 12-year-old. And so like right now, my husband's gone deer hunting. And so like some of my practices and routines are like thrown out the window. And like I can feel it, like I can feel like my mornings are more stressful. But some of the things I just listen, I mean, like setting the coffee maker the night before. Otherwise, in the morning, as soon as I wake up, I'm like, oh my God, I can't get ready yet. I gotta go make the coffee. Then I make the coffee. Then I'm letting the dogs like, so my whole routine is just thrown off by just not setting the timer on the coffee maker. Having my outfits laid out. The exercise. So like in Holly Whitaker's book, Quit Like a Woman, she talks about how she talks about like you're either a drinker or a non-drinker, and she's like, I don't have to make the decision every single day because I've already decided I'm a non-drinker. And so I've applied that to like working out. Like I've decided that like I'm somebody who exercises, and so like for me it made it so much easier of like I don't have to decide when I wake up, am I going to get on the treadmill? Like now it's become like automatic. That's what I do. I set my alarm for I automate my alarm. It's set, like I don't have to go in there every day and change it. It's set for the whole week. Get up, go to the treadmill. And so just like building that routine every single day. I fill my water jug the night before. So some of those simple things, like packing the car the night before with any of the kids' stuff, anything that you can do to make that some of that come at you a little bit less in a less stressful way.
Oh, it sounds like we have a very similar set of things that we do to prep ourselves in start the day to end the day. I call them my bookends. And it's just like every Monday and Wednesday, white shirt, Tuesday and Thursday, black shirt. And like it's down to that now. Like my timer
is awesome.
My cups, I put them up in the right place. Kids' lunches are made before we go to bed because I'm not having that in the morning. Be like, our mornings now have gone from where they used to be when they were younger, like just chaos, to just like you get, if they sleep in till like 15 minutes before we have to be out the door, so be it. They get dressed, brush your teeth, let's go, and we have everything.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I want to show you something. This actually has really helped me kind of change some of what I was doing. But and there's several things like this, but I found this journal. This is called Goal Crazy. And so when you open it up, there's actually, I don't know if it's in this version, but in some of the previous versions, there's like a wheel of life in it. Which a lot of us as coaches do a wheel of life. But essentially, like you kind of start going through this journal and it asks you like, what are some of my accomplishments? What are some of the things you've wanted to do but haven't? And then here we go. Here's the wheel of life is in the journal. And then it starts with like a monthly overview. So you kind of put your goals in there. But what I like the most is the daily pages. So you can see each daily page has a spot for you. Start your day with like, what's your most impactful goal? And then what am I grateful for in your affirmations? And then at the end of the day, there's reflections. What did I accomplish today and what were my best moments? So you talk about bookends. Like when I do this regularly, I notice a huge difference in myself too, especially like, what am I grateful for? Like acknowledging different things every day, like that practice of gratitude is so important. And then affirmations. I now have affirmations too, like on my bathroom mirrors, so I can say those to myself. But starting the day with that, and then reflecting on the day too, like even if you're like, God, this was a shit day, but being forced to think about like, what were 3 of your best moments today, has been a really helpful process, and just, I guess staying mentally sane sometimes.
Well, it's like, it's corny, but gratitude is the attitude. Like it's definitely an important part to reflect upon, because it's, if you're grateful, it's really hard to be in like in a bad place. Like it's, I would say it's impossible.
Right.
Someone can come fight me and prove me wrong with science, whatever. But my experience has told me, it's like, if I can get into a state of like gratitude and list out my 5 things like I do every night, it's just like, I don't end my night pissed off. It's just like, okay, there's got to be, and there are some days that I'm just like, are we even going to get 1 out? And be like, no, I'm committed to 5. It can be the sun was out, or I only stepped
Yeah.
in like 3 piles of puppy poo. Like it doesn't matter.
Yes,
Like
yeah.
if you can shift it, you can still find it in there, and it is helpful because it's just like, okay, I can change my state and I can find the things that go well. And yes, there are things that are not going to go well. There's things that are going to go bump in the night and that are just going to throw a wrench in everything. And we can also still find great things to be grateful for all in that same day.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's part of the human condition, and it's probably more natural to lean into the negative and get caught up in the negative. And it can be so dangerous too to spend a lot of time there. That's why I think that practice, practice
Yeah.
of those things of, being grateful and what are the things I'm grateful for, and like forcing yourself at times to think that, like, to me, it makes me a better person.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. Right. And as he was talking about the negative side, like the metaphor that comes to my mind is like, you want a vacation there? I'd be like, I don't even think you want a vacation. Like, you can go visit, and but don't buy the timeshare or anything else because, like, to move you
Yeah.
forward, you're going to need some of these other tools that this is going to shut down. And it's also actually important to acknowledge it, right? Like that negative, like being
Yes. Yeah.
driven to
Yeah.
the negative side, had when our species was younger, served us very well. And there's a reason
Yeah.
that our brains are hardwired to avoid like negative stuff over winning because it kept us here and it's allowed us to get to the point that we have the technology that we're doing this show right now. It has a purpose, but we live
Yeah.
in a spot that we're not chased by saber-toothed tigers anymore. So now we have to like bring this like high level amount of consciousness to
Yeah.
the fact going, what are you actually trying to say? Right? Like I actually did a little exercise on the weekend where I've created my board, like my allies and my leader within this, some CTI
Mhm.
talk now. But like for those who aren't familiar with it, it's like we all have allies, we all have things that are like we gravitate to, right? And we have our saboteurs. And I've included my
Mhm.
saboteurs because they're always going to be there. They're I can either look at them as like this huge voice going everything's wrong, or I can look at them going they're a gatekeeper to like they're going we're about to hit
Mm.
the edge. You think you're good enough for this? Be like, I guess we're going to find out. Thanks for letting me know that there's a gate here. Like
Yeah.
if we pretend like they don't exist, they're only going to get louder and angrier. Acknowledge them, stuff them in the little blue Tesla behind us, lock the windows sometimes if you need to, but listen to them because there's actually that we go all the way back to like that conversation at the beginning of this episode where it's just like someone's bitching, be like, what's
Mhm.
actually under there? What's underneath the
Yeah.
picture?
Right. There's so many great things that you said in there, but one of the things I think about too is like sometimes when I try so hard to be positive, what ends up happening is I like just circumvent the emotions, or like you were just talking about, like maybe circumventing like what's the saboteur trying to tell me here, and incorrectly maybe thinking that that was the positive or healthy thing to do. And that's one of the things probably in the last couple of years that I've learned is like, no, you have to listen to that. You have to name it. Like, what is it?
Yeah,
Why is that coming up? And then, yeah, like I love your analogy of like you can vacation there for a second. Doesn't mean I'm going to go live there all the time, but like
yeah.
it is really important to pay attention to what is coming up for you.
And I even heard at one point, many number of years ago, but this guy I think was on a podcast, and the guest was talking about kind of this subject, and it's just like it's okay to like be in the dumps and everything, but like maybe set time. Like he's like, I set time every day. I give myself like 15, anywhere from 5 to 15 minutes to just have a pissy party. I think he called it, and he has it. And then when the
Yeah.
time's up, all right, everybody, got to go home. We're back to our regular scheduled business. And he said it's just like his mental state just did one of these because he was no longer fighting it,
Mm.
gave it its space. Was there something he could learn from it, or did he just need to be cranky in that moment and then move on? And I don't know. I've taken that and done that myself. Be like, okay, 5 minutes of being cranky, and then you're like, usually you start to make yourself laugh, and the energy changes. You're like, nah, I'm over it. Let's move on.
Yeah, and I think that's so healthy. And I think about too, especially with like little people right now that I'm raising, about how many times it's almost ingrained in us to be like, stop crying, like stop doing that. And it's like, oh, like, what am I teaching them by saying that? So I think
Yeah.
about that often.
So you remember how I said early before we went on, I was going to look up and see that we're at 45 minutes now. So like, I want to be highly respectful of your time. I appreciated and enjoyed this conversation a lot, Lisa.
Me
So
too, Gene.
before we,
This has been great. I just being able to roll with you, and we could talk for hours.
I think we could easily talk for hours. But you've got 3 little ones at home that you should get back to as well. So this is the time in the show that, give a shout out to yourself and let people know what you're up to and where they can find you.
Awesome. Thanks, Gene. So, like we said in the very beginning, I work in education, but on the side, I do a lot of coaching, and specifically, I work a lot with school leaders. I'm a former principal, and so you can find my website at www.breakthroughwithheart.com. And you can find me on Facebook or LinkedIn or Instagram by just looking up Breakthrough with Heart.
Perfect. And as well, all the links are in the description down below, and was not prepared to copy that in, but they'll be in the comments too. Bam. So if you're looking to connect with Lisa, definitely go. There's all the links for you again. So before I let you go, I ask every guest the same question. We're going to hop into my time machine. We're going to go back 10 years. What's the one piece of advice that you give yourself?
I mean, just like when I first started thinking about that, I'm like, gosh, I don't know what I would say. And then like, as we had this conversation, I'm like, there's 100 things I think that I would say. But one of the things that I think that really got in my way, that I've really started to figure out, and it's really empowered me to figure it out, was to figure out, what does it mean to be a people pleaser? And am I a people pleaser? Why am I a people pleaser? And how can I stop being a people pleaser? And it kind of goes with some of the comments I had before about how taking everything personally. And I think it really empowered me to stop doing that and recognize that came from a place of trying to be a people pleaser. And actually being a people pleaser is selfish in nature, because you're, again, making it about you, and there's your ego at play. So if I could go back 10 years with that knowledge, I just think, man, like what a kick-ass leader I could have been with that knowledge.
I love that. That is a great piece. That's, again, I've had a few unique ones now, so that's another one of those unique ones to add. I've seen some different themes, but I really love that one. So with that, we're going to wrap the show up. So everybody, Lisa, again, thank you for being on episode 68. This has been fantastic. For everybody else, I want you to find one thing to not be a people pleaser with this week. Just one thing. And from there, we will see you next Wednesday. My name's Gene. I'm the Enjoyment Coach, and this has been LiveCast Conversations with